Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the It Depends podcast. Now we're going to call it It Depends Lessons in Technology Leadership because are now past the book. So we have now completed the book. This is the first podcast after. Today, we're going to be doing questions and answers. So throughout the newsletter, throughout the podcast, I've been getting questions from you all. And I think I originally answered some of them up front. I've been saving the rest. So we're going to do a few episodes now where I'm just answering your questions. If you have questions and you didn't get a chance to ask them, or you want to respond to something I say today or in the next episodes, you can send those to me. contact@itdependsbook.net. And that's how you can reach me. So my plan right now is to do a few of these Q&A episodes. I might do one episode on meta topic of writing the book because I got a couple of people who asked me about that. It comes up quite a lot sometimes when I talk to other people and when I'm on other podcasts. So I may do one of those episodes to tail end what I'm calling this first season. That'll put me into summer. I may take a break because I've been doing this pretty consistently. So I may take a month off or something and then come back for the second season. But today I'm answering some of your questions. This first question comes from Luca R. And his email says, "Ciao. I was listening to a podcast episode titled Thoughts on Emulating Spotify's Matrix Organizations in Other Companies last week, and it made me think about challenge we are having at my edtech startup in Milan. I'm Luca, engineering manager here, and I face a problem with my dev team. We need more collaboration with product and design teams for building our tools, but sometimes this creates confusion about who is responsible for deliverables. How can I keep clear accountability in my engineering team, but still encourage collaboration that our startup needs? I want to avoid creating silos between teams, but we also need to meet our sprint commitments on time. Would appreciate your thoughts on this balance. Grazie, Luca. Grazie, Luca, to sending me the question. Sorry, I paraphrased your email a little bit. The question is, how do you keep clear accountability in the engineering team, but still encourage collaboration when you're working in kind of a matrix org or collaborating with product and design? This is not an uncommon problem. So, because every part of the organization that's touching the product is trying to drive accountability. I have had literally to correct product manager job descriptions that said, you own this thing. Because the chief product officer shared that with me, which is very nice of them. But then I read that and said, nope, they don't own this thing. They work with other teams to collectively own this thing. But the last thing I want is a product manager who feels like they're the accountable one only for delivery when that actually isn't their job. That's the engineering leader's job. So it becomes difficult. And I think some of the rise that we've seen in these kind of combined product and engineering leadership roles, where either engineering rolls up under product or product rolls up under engineering, I see it both ways, is partially to address this. The product leader is given product goals that they're expected to hit. Obviously, they can't do anything without support from design and engineering. And sometimes those two teams can have conflicts. And since they don't report to the same person, it's really hard to resolve them. And so what ends up happening is it seems clear one person needs to be responsible for this, not two. So that rise of these kind of combined roles, which is becoming more common, I think part of it is this founder mode thing. I think part of it is folks looking at middle management layers and trying to reduce them. I think a lot of it is long simmering tension between product and engineering orgs. So it's a serious thing, and you actually have to deal with it. You can't ignore it. But in a healthy organization, it is an agreement. Engineering doesn't own product direction. That is the product team's job. And product team doesn't own delivery because that's the engineering team's job. And design is responsible for UX. So I think making it very clear that the product leader, product manager, product owner, if you're doing agile roles, is the one that's responsible for what's the next thing we work on? Engineering leader, engineering manager, engineering lead is responsible for how does that thing get built and built in a sustainable, maintainable, supportable way with high quality. If you have a quality peer, that person then owns that quality and then obviously is trying to drive that. And then design is trying to figure out what's the best way for this to have good user experience and drive a positive user experience. So these roles don't have to nest under the same person to drive accountability. Each of them needs to be accountable for their role, and the set of them, however many there are, representing these different roles within a team, need to be collectively accountable if the team isn't achieving its goals. And those goals have to not just be the product goals, they have to be product goals, engineering goals, UX goals, whatever. It's difficult because senior leadership generally isn't as interested in the how because they're not coming from engineering. They want to make sure everything works clearly and they want to make sure it works well, but they don't necessarily care about that part. They care about the what, not necessarily the how, which creates kind of a problem. And I've seen this be a problem in organizations where product gets heard more than engineering because no one understands what engineering's saying. And that is a case where we as engineering leaders have to be really good at explaining stuff to non-engineering people. We can't just say we're ignoring tech debt, it's going to be a problem someday. We actually have to talk about the consequences, both near term and real consequences, and how that could impact customers, how that could impact delivery. And we also have to listen when the company is trying to hit a revenue goal for this quarter or this year, and you're hearing that from the senior leadership. And we have to be accountable to that as well. And sometimes that means we have to make a deal with the product lead. We're not going to spend this time that I really think we should spend, but we're not going to do that right now so we can hit this broader company goal. But we're going to come back to this. Let's make a deal. I'm willing to forego this right now, but then you have to promise me that we'll address this in this time frame. This also requires that you as an engineering leader, Luca, you need to be aware of those company goals and how your team can impact them. I'm going to look at your question again, make sure I answered it. That collaboration with accountability. Yeah, Luca, you have to collaborate. If you're driving one thing, product leader's driving another, design's driving another, towards totally different directions, none of you are going to accomplish anything. And what you're going to create is a lot of tension and a lot of fighting, and it's going to end up getting resolved above you in probably a way that at least two of the three of you are not going to be happy about. So you as the lead or as the leader need to be aware of the goals of the other teams. They need to be aware of the goals you have. You may be trying to achieve technology goals, maybe tech debt, maybe evolution, architectural evolution. The three of you need to be talking about that pretty consistently, pretty often, and treating yourselves like a team. So at the C level, like for me as a CTO, my peer is the chief product officer, my peer is CFO, my peer is the heads of marketing, operations. I need to be aware what they're driving towards. They need to be aware what I'm driving towards. We all need to be aligned on our common goals, because otherwise, even at that level, we could be working across purposes. So obviously me and the chief product officer, we have to be like two peas in a pod, because we have to be knowing everything the other one's planning and thinking about, and we need to be coordinating our plans. But the marketing's part of this too, right? So we can't do this and ignore that marketing's pushing these initiatives forward. That might conflict with what we're trying to do. And me and engineering, both as leading engineering, but also leading data, I also have to be directly supporting the marketing goals and the finance goals and the operations goals. To that extent, I need to be coordinating with all the cross functions to make sure that I know what they need, they know what I'm driving towards, and we all know that we're headed in the right direction. We're aligning to the company goals. If you take that down another level, you should be doing that with your peers as well. And then they're going to bring context that you don't have because they're coming from a different discipline and they're having different conversations with their peers and with their manager. and you're bringing context that they don't have for the exact same reason. You share that context, you build a shared vision of the world, and you move forward together. And you each take accountability for your part of that team, those team goals, and you arrive at those team goals together. If you're struggling with a product manager who's not good at that, or who doesn't see it that way, that's a conversation for you and your manager, and possibly for them and their manager. Luca, I hope that answered your question. Send me a follow-up if it did not, and I can address that. This next question comes from Tatiana O. Dear Sir, I have recently finished reading your book, It Depends, and was especially interested by a chapter about writing useful performance reviews, evaluating the data and writing the review. Thank you. This has given me much to think about for my own department. I am head of data science at fintech company in Tallinn, Estonia, and currently I am working to improve our performance evaluation framework. We have a very good system for measuring quantitative outputs, how many models team members deploy, what percentage of accuracy improvements they achieve, etc. But I face difficulty with proper evaluation of team members who make more qualitative contributions. For example, some people are excellent at mentoring junior analysts, or they generate innovative approaches that do not immediately translate to metrics we can measure easily. These skills are very valuable, but not showing up in our current evaluation process. How can I create systemic evaluation that acknowledges these soft contributions while still maintaining data-driven rigor that our leadership team expects? In fintech industry, we need both technical excellence and human skills, but measuring only first part gives incomplete picture. I want our performance reviews to properly reflect company priorities and ensure we develop right talent mix for long-term success of organization. Thank you for consideration of my questions. Tatiana. How do you measure both qualitative and quantitative? This is obviously, Tatiana, given that you're a data science leader, you're thinking very much in terms of quantitative, but how do you measure the qualitative impact that people have? And you're looking for a systemic evaluation framework that acknowledges the soft contributions, data-driven rigor that your leadership team expects. Okay. Got it. Tatiana, guess what? Sorry, qualitative is hard because there's no particularly easy way to measure it. It's qualitative, not quantitative by definition. But you're absolutely right. Both need to be acknowledged. Both need to be part of your rubric. That's critical. Otherwise, you end up rewarding that quantitative part and building a team that is really good at doing number stuff and really bad at working together. And your team won't succeed if you don't think about both. So it's a good question to ask, but it is hard to measure. What I have tried to do is not make it perfect, because you can't. There's just bias, and it's a human thing. So bias is going to come in all sorts of ways. And you have to acknowledge that fact and focus on not necessarily solving the problem or being perfect with it, but being good enough and being fair. So you're not going to necessarily measure the specific amount of support a single member of your team gives to a junior person. But you should be trying. And you should be trying to make sure that somebody who does a great job with that isn't being punished relative to somebody else who doesn't, right? The best thing I've found to measure these kind of soft skill impact that people have is a 360 or just asking folks. So whether my company does this or not, and not every company does it for every review, but I do it for every review, I will send a questionnaire out to about everyone that I am writing reviews for. For example, for all my directs. And if they're managers, I send them to all of their reports, as well as some of their peers and some of the folks in other parts of the organization that I think they may interact with a lot. And it's not a long questionnaire. It's a very simple questionnaire because you want people to actually fill it out. That questionnaire has a few questions. The critical ones are, what is this person doing well? What do you think this person could do better? Is there anything I should know that you don't think I already know about this person and how they're doing? I sometimes add another question or two, but I try and keep it relatively short. I try and keep it so it's understood you don't have to write a page. You could write a couple sentences, you could write a paragraph, just so people know I'm not expecting them to spend a ton of time on this, but I see common things emerge. And by the way, another reason to send it out fairly widely is not everyone's going to answer it. Not everybody has time to answer it. So usually we'll get enough answers back that I can see some trends or see some grouping here. And that'll usually tend to identify some specific things, both helpful and not helpful, that the person is doing. And that helps me put some kind of quantification on that soft skills. That is how we generally, you would know in data science, that is how we generally try and quantify these unquantifiable things. And I know data science doesn't always look at these things with a ton of respect, things like customer satisfaction scores and things like that. But we try and get enough data that we at least see some trend lines. That is the best way I've found to try and make this quantitative. At the very least, it gives you some data to back up your opinions. And that way you can incorporate that into the actual review, along with that really quantitative stuff that you can see from the number of models they're producing or those kinds of things. And to be fair, there's a little bit of bias in there too, if you're not careful, because I could do a whole bunch of little things to get that number up versus a much smaller number, but very impactful things. So you have to be really careful about being too quantitative about these kinds of things, because as people, we're looking at people, and people are all different, and the value they bring is all different. So you just have to be careful about how you think about this. While it is desirable and it feels right, especially if you're a data-driven person, to make this as numbers-driven as possible, in the end, we're talking about people, and people are all different, and the way they contribute is all different. So we can't get too fixated on all of that. I hope I answered your question. Next question. Oh, there's another question from Tatiana. Again, hello. Thank you, Tatiana. 2 questions. I wish to write to you again after finishing chapter Becoming a CTO. In your book, the chapter has made me think very carefully about my own career direction. Awesome. Currently, I am considering long-term path for my professional growth. I have built data science department from 0 to team of 15 specialists, and I now wonder if CTO position might be the next logical step in my future. In our fintech company, technology strategy becomes more important every year. What I need to understand is which capabilities I should develop beyond technical knowledge I already possess. Data science is only one part of technology ecosystem, and CTO must understand many other areas. That's right. Also, how to know when I am ready for such transition. Are there specific metrics or achievements that show a person is prepared for CTO role? I'm especially interested to learn about building enterprise-wide technology vision and how to collaborate effectively with other executives. In my current position, I work mainly with other technical teams, but C-level position would require a different approach to communication and strategic thinking. Your thoughts on this matter would be very valuable to me. Thank you again, Tatiana. I know I'm acting surprised, but of course I put these questions in order, so I shouldn't be, but I did that a little while ago, so it is actually surprising me. So Tatiana, you're a data science leader. You're interested in becoming a CTO. Awesome. And you're wondering how you get from where you are now to there. It depends. It depends on how much you're interested in being wider and how much you're interested in being more senior, exec level, C-level. Normally, especially somebody like you who's worked hard to get to this point in your career, if you are working for me, I would probably be advising you towards a chief data officer role. Not every company has chief data officers, but companies that are very data driven would. And that would normally report to the CTO, but you might actually be a member of the executive team, a full-fledged member. And depending on the company and the criticality of data to that company, that might even be reporting to the CEO and being peer of the CTO. But it sounds like you're actually interested in being a CTO, like full responsibility. And maybe that also, given how you talk about expanding your breadth, that kind of leads me to believe you're interested in being a CTO at a technology company that's not specifically a data science or data company. Let me just really briefly talk about your path from where you are now to the chief data officer role. That is essentially just continuing to do your job and improving in that year over year, but then also, and this is critical for the CTO role at some point for you as well, that would also require you to then step up where you are already working cross-functionally, maybe with finance or marketing, or you're in fintech. So yeah, probably with governance and those kinds of teams. So you're not just working with engineering. I would be starting to build relationships cross-functionally. Your engineering relationships, if you have them, that's actually good. If you really want to pursue that, I want to be a CTO role, which, by the way, may infer that at some point, like you're running more engineering than you are data, because that is generally the role. That also will often mean you're running IT and things like that. So all that stuff comes under your purview. Data normally or often would be part of that as well. So that's clearly your strength. If I was looking at that, I might actually look at a horizontal move or trying to figure out in a fintech company where maybe you could start building data-driven products within the data team itself. Talk to your manager, if that person is the CTO today, about wanting to take on more engineering responsibilities and maybe even product development responsibilities where you could start to build some experience there. And that might be you identify some data-driven products that maybe you want to lead the development of, that gives you more exposure to working with the product team, testing for like product, more experience, taking responsibility for production systems, not just data production systems, so that you can start expanding your skill set and branching out a little bit. You might even, if you're really serious about developing these skills, once you've gotten a little bit of experience that way, actually look to move to an engineering leadership job away from the data team, maybe promote a peer or one of your directs to take your job so that you can move into engineering leadership. Again, this is going to depend a lot on your company, how okay they are with that and supporting that kind of development. But if they are, that's a great opportunity. You can move into an engineering leadership role. And it may be, you might have to step down where you're going to be a line manager for an engineering team for a little while. And then obviously, given your experience and what's gotten you to a head of role, theoretically, that should be putting you on a path for promotion when it's available into managing multiple engineering leaders. So it depends how serious you are about this and about being like a CTO of a kind of a broader technology company as opposed to being like a data science company. If you are looking at being a CTO of a data science company, that broader skill set is still useful, but I would maybe take the CDO path first and get to that level where now you're representing at an executive level. And for a company that is really data-driven, really data science forward, they may be willing to hire you to take a broader engineering responsibility given your data-only background, and maybe in a position where you have a really strong VPE reporting to you that has experience running engineering teams, but in a company that is really data science forward, that your data experience will maybe be more valuable with an understanding of engineering than an actual direct experience running engineering. And you might be able to, again, hire somebody that you would trust to run that for you. So from data, it's not as direct of a path, especially because you're so senior, but you can leverage that seniority and experience, which does translate. The specific skills don't translate, but the broader skills of leadership and cross-functional working at a senior level, those kinds of things will actually put you in good stead to do that kind of transition where you're taking on a broader role. Thank you for those 2 questions. It's great. I hope I answered them both well enough for you. Again, reach out to me, contact@itdepensbook.net. If you were unhappy with those answers, you can also reach me. I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Blue Sky. I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Twitter. I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Instagram. You can reach me at all those places. Next question. This is from Priya D. Subject, building resilience against industry layoffs. Oh, gosh. Okay. I know I'm sounding surprised, but of course I'm not. Hello, Mr. Goldsmith. Hello. I'm writing to you after reading your newsletter on protecting your team from layoffs yesterday. This topic is hitting very close to home right now, as 2 fintech companies near our office in Bangalore had big cuts last month. Another fintech person. A lot of fintech people. Some of my college batchmates lost their jobs there. Batchmates is classmates, I think. I have been promoted to team lead for Payment Integration Squad only 6 months back. My team is meeting all KPIs and delivering good output, but I am seeing that performance metrics are not always mattering when company needs to reduce headcount quickly. Our CEO is saying everything is fine, but I am not fully convinced. Smart. The funding situation is becoming tight for many startups in our space. Yep. What practical steps can I take beyond the regular advice like keep LinkedIn updated or network more? I want to make sure that my team members and myself remain valuable and employable if situation is becoming worse suddenly. Any specific suggestions for someone in fintech sector who is new to leadership role would be most helpful. Okay. So Payment Integration Squad. So obviously payment integration is very important in a fintech. Probably one of the most important roles. One of the biggest pieces of advice I give often is be the franchise. And what that means is, and I don't know if this is even a saying, but I got it in my head that it's a saying mostly about baseball. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's been in my head for so long. That's just what I say. And when I say that, what I mean is be on the most critical path for the company. For example, if you can. So my second job was at a hardware company. I worked for Silicon Graphics. And what I realized very quickly, I was a software person at a hardware company. And Silicon Graphics made great software, but hardware is what they sold. The software provided value to the hardware that was selling. And one of the first things I did there, I owned something that was a critical part of a launch for a new hardware box, but the schedule wasn't driven by the stuff we needed to do on the software side. The schedule was driven by the hardware being ready. And no matter where we were at, when the hardware was ready, it was going to ship. And so we had to do whatever we needed to do to not delay that ship, including cutting corners in lots of places. And I learned from that experience, oh, okay, well, they value software, but what they sell is hardware. And as long as I'm doing software, whatever I'm working on is going to be the second priority to what the hardware teams are doing. And that makes sense. I was at a hardware company. And since then, I've never worked at a hardware company again. I've also tried to avoid, I'm never going to say never, but I generally try to avoid being part of the software group of a different industry for that reason. Since then, I've only worked in software companies because in software companies, I'm the franchise. I'm working on the most critical thing. But if you are working for a fintech company, you are working in a software company, then the best thing you can be, if you're really thinking about career longevity and avoiding getting laid off, the most important thing for you to do is then be working on the most important stuff for the company, the stuff that drives revenue. If your team is directly impacting revenue, it's not a promise, it's not a guarantee, but you are going to be less likely to be impacted by a cost-cutting move than a team that is a support team to you. It's just a fact. So that's something to be aware of and something to keep in mind. If you're working on the payments team for a fintech, probably pretty good, probably an important thing for any company trying to drive revenue. And if you're the lead of that team and you feel like your team is on the line often for critical company initiatives, that's great. That means that you are understood to be an important part of it. Your team needs to stay visible. People need to know what your team is delivering or contributing. And I talk in a different chapter about ways to remain visible and to be visible. Make sure your demos are there. Make sure you are reporting out of the things that your team delivered and you're tying that back into company priorities so people understand that you are directly contributing to company priorities. Again, still no guarantee, but it definitely helps. Having had to do this in multiple companies, I can tell you, if your leadership finds out we need to be more profitable than we are, or we need to cut costs, and what they start to do is they're going to look around the organization and they're going to say, which teams can we comfortably cut back or eliminate without impacting our ability to maintain revenue or even grow in revenue. So it depends whether they're feeling that their costs are too high and they want to continue to deliver but get better margins, which happens, or whether they're needing to grow revenue, but they need to cut costs to give more runway. So if you need to grow revenue but cut costs, you're going to look at the support teams, you're going to pare them back to bare minimum, and just understand that eventually you're going to have to grow those again, but you want to put all your investment into revenue generation, into revenue growth. If you're just trying to cut costs, you may pare back some of that. If you have a mature product and really what you're just trying to do is keep customers happy, maybe deliver new features on demand, or you're working with customization, maybe features may not be the priority, but keeping existing customers happy while reducing costs. So it could come more distributed that way. Another thing, I talk about this in one of the chapters, is make sure you know who on your team is critical and don't keep low performers around necessarily, because teams get known for having low performers on them, and that will target the team as a place where savings could be done. If it's generally understood you have a low performer on your team, you might end up having to cut 2 people instead of 1, which is not good if you only have 1 low performer. It's better to be thought of that your team runs really efficiently and really well. That may also mean if you're just really concerned about having people keep their jobs, if you have good people on your team, you may end up having to transfer one of your people to a different team because they're replacing a low performer on another team. But then they get to keep their job. So that's good. So these are all strategies you need to think about. If your leadership is saying, we're fine, it's good to be a little skeptical if others in your same office park are cutting jobs. It's good to keep that in mind. So keep your team visible. Make sure you're working on the right stuff, the most important stuff for the company. Make sure that you are not supporting underperforming talent, because it puts a target on your team. And build your network, keep your network warm, and keep your LinkedIn up to date. That is good advice for a reason. Make sure if you work to other places, you're keeping up with your friends. What are they doing? What are they aware of? And also, if some of your classmates are looking for work, help them find jobs right now, because they will do you the return favor if the worst happens at your company. So I'm hoping for you that this all works out well. And best of luck, Priya. Yeah, it's a difficult time right now. Again, Thank you so much for your questions. If you have a question, please send it to contact@itdependsbook.net. You can also contact me on Blue Sky. I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Blue Sky at bsky.social. You can also reach me on Threads. I'm not there as often. I'm Kevin Goldsmith there because I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Instagram. So you can reach me on those too as well. You can reach me on Twitter. I don't look at Twitter very often anymore, but I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Twitter as well. So any of those will work. You can reach me through LinkedIn if you'd prefer. If you have questions, comments, whatever. Next week in the newsletter, I'm going to be encapsulating, I think, some of this into a sort of shorter text-based form. That's going to be my experiment for next week. Again, thinking about how moving forward, the podcast and the newsletter differ or stay the same, or how they each move forward together. Some of this will show up in the newsletter next week. I'm going to try that. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I've got a ton more questions. And again, I'm still taking them. I've got enough questions. I could probably do several episodes. I may or may not, but I may do a few. And so if you have more, I can just keep doing more episodes if you're finding this valuable. And I hope you have a great week. I will see you next week in the newsletter. I'll see you back here on the podcast in 2 weeks. Have a great week. Thanks so much for listening. Please, again, subscribe, rate, share episodes of this podcast on your favorite podcast app. Thank you for Answers to April for the music used in this podcast. To hear more from Answers to April, visit answerstoapril.com. This podcast is a production of Unit Circle Media.